You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM.
Welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show, recording here live from downtown Batuta. The show goes on, the games go on. Of course, Errol Parker, editor-at-large, is home sick, so you're just left with me, Clancy Overall, editor of the Batuta Advocate. And today's guest, I'm actually a big fan of today's guest. I've been following him for better part of 2 decades, I'm almost going to say now. He's an esteemed Australian athlete. He's a good country kid too, hailing from the Central West, New South Wales. And this is his first time in 20 years he's sitting back and watching the Paralympics, which, you know, he's watching, but you're going to see him on the screens too, because he's anchoring the coverage of the Tokyo Paralympics Games. Thank you for joining us today, Kurt Fearnley.
No problems. Thanks for the invite.
Now, mate, what is life like when you kind of, you know, when the bright lights dim on like what has been for you one of the longest careers in sport we've seen?
Mate, I saw a lot of people go through that transition from athlete back into the life. It's a friend told me before I went through it, it's like you're getting divorced from a partner.
Yep.
You just need to be able to let this thing go and be able to create something different on the outside.
Yep.
Thankfully, over the last 10 years of racing, I found a lot of other stuff that I loved. You know, I would start my own family in the last few years, and then I had an idea of where I wanted to finish. I wanted to finish at the Gold Coast. I would start representing Australia at Sydney in 2000. I wanted to finish in another home games at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. It was a hell of a games, an amazing moment. I got to share the podium with my wife, my kids, and I just knew I was done. Yep. So that was it was a really great place to stop.
Yep.
Just knowing that you were done and knowing that you love stuff more than the sport itself.
Yeah, knowing you now had an exit plan, like you had things on the other side of these games that you were looking towards.
For sure, and a community that I'm a teacher. I work a bit abroad. I work a bit with employment for people with disabilities. I've got a little school overseas that educates kids with disabilities. I'd started. There was just so much happening on the outside that it was almost like a natural progression. It was pretty fortunate because it can be a challenge, but for me, it worked out pretty nicely.
Now, you had I guess Sydney, for a lot of athletes of your vintage, and I'm looking at Thorpe on the screens on the screen now as well, probably a good place to start, really, because it's just a drive away from wherever you are in the country, whether that be Olympics, Paralympics, or whatever else was going on. You know, in Sydney, there was a big push in the sports around that time. I remember, you know, there was a lot of success. A lot of gold, but also, you know, you look at the tennis and you look at we had a Rugby World Cup around that time, and you look at all of the kind of stars that came out of that era, you know, turn of the millennium in Australian sport. That was your first Olympics. Where were you living at the time? Was it just a drive across the Blue Mountains?
Yeah, I moved down a year and a half before the games, and I was sleeping on couches and doing whatever I had to do to kind of afford to be able to train the next day. So I ended up living out in the back room of a lady's house in Lidcombe.
Yeah, right.
And so it was a challenging couple of years. When I moved down there from Carcoar, from the Central West, I slept on my coach's lounge for a couple of months, and then I found a job. I was working in a leagues club checking IDs when I was 17. Couldn't go inside the club, and I was the worst bouncer in the world, you know. But it was momentum. It was energy. Like Sydney around that period of time was one of the most exciting times to be in Sydney.
Yeah.
People talk about those games, whether you're in the games competing or just driving through the streets. People speak about how amazing that city was during that period of time, which makes me just as excited about them coming to Brisbane in 2032. It's not just the competition, you know. It's not just the event or the Olympic athletes or the Paralympic athletes that get that real sense of being part of something bigger than themselves. It's anyone that's in that vicinity. And at that point in time, all sport, everyone that had the ability to pull on the green and gold kind of just stood a bit firmer.
Yeah. And I guess with the, with the home hosting the Olympics, the country gets kind of, well, they have to put someone in every event because you get automatic entry. So that's where we did see a lot of personalities you might not have seen in an overseas Olympics. And there were a lot of characters too. Do you find it's been easier for you to get the ball rolling post-Sydney? Because then you had a big job of going, overseas. Then you had the big job of going, to all of these massive cities. It was one thing to be, working in a leagues club, couch surfing to get yourself to. You were still a stone's throw from home, really. And then, was that a good place to start? Because then, then all of a sudden we're talking about international flights. We're talking about Athens. We're talking about, London.
Mate, it was an awesome place to start because you got to feel what it's like to have 118,000 people screaming out your name. You got your first competition, you got bitten by what was just a heightened experience for every single Aussie. And really the team was building for the 6 years before that as well. So you got to be a part of this. It's like the lead and hook. The hook got you, and it was just... It was a pretty powerful hook at that point in time. Yeah. And then when I got into Sydney and got a couple of silver medals, you'd had just enough taste of it, to just enough success to want to be better, but not so much success that you can kind of go, okay, I'm done.
Yep.
So for me, it felt like, now looking at it, it was a perfect way to start. It got me in there, got me fired up enough to kind of bury myself for another 3.5 years, go out there and get those couple of gold medals, and then also to finish in 18 years later as well with another gold. I couldn't have asked for a better story arc.
You won golds across, so you won medals across, you won your golds, you won silvers, bronze, across an array of events. What did you think was your event? What did you
think?
Marathon?
My life was about marathons. I would race 72-ish marathons over the 20 years. I'd win 42 of them. I'd be on the podium in another 20. So... all parts of my life were all about trying to refine that 42 kilometres and trying to figure out where the efficiencies could be made, trying to figure out, what courses I wanted to kind of get under my belt. And the marathon industry, I guess it's called, the events are huge around the world as well. Like New York Marathon, you race in front of 50 million people every year, 2 million people on the sides of the roads. So you get these really exciting events that are outside the Olympic and Paralympic experience as well. And it was more than just an event. It was part of my life for a couple of decades.
Now, you come from a big family out there in Carcoar, just outside of Blaney. You can always eat the soil out there. It's good. It's good. It's an agricultural breadbasket. What was going on around you? Were you from a big sporting family?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I was. My family were a lot of rugby league and a lot of netball.
Yep.
My uncle, when I was a young fella through the early 80s, was coaching New South Wales and Australia in the rugby league.
Right.
He would coach New South Wales through to its first state of origin win, and he'd be the reason why a state-based coach can't coach national level team as well.
Yeah,
because he took hold of the reins of the Aussie, the green and gold, and sacked every single Queenslander out of the squad.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Uncle Terry was he coached Parramatta as well, and a few of my cousins were playing in the state or national based leagues, and I always saw sport, and really a lot of kids from the bush see this is it's the biggest stage that the world's got.
Yeah.
Like when you're sitting around school, you're not talking about who's going to be a scientist.
No.
You're not talking about which one of the classes is headed into any other field. You're talking about sport constantly. And the green and gold for me is, and for a lot of kids, especially in the bush, I think, the green and gold is like royalty. It's the thing that is as high as you can possibly go, but is achievable for you.
Yep.
It's yours. You're not born into it. Every part of it you've got to earn.
Yep.
Every part of it you've got to hurt to get to.
Yep.
But but it can be yours.
But you can also see the pathway from the bush, you know. You can't necessarily see the pathways into being a scientist, short of, you know, a school visit to the CSIRO base, you know, or you went down. I'm sure you went down and saw the dish in Parks, like, you know. That's all a bit of fun.
We all went to the dish and we all went to Canberra. The science, what's the...
Questacon.
The little Questacon. Yeah. Every kid from the bush walks through Questacon for one day over 6 years, and they go, wait, there's more to science than a Bunsen burner?
Yeah. There's all this gravity stuff. Yeah. Slippery slides and the like.
But sport is a powerful tool for that part of the world, and I'm not saying that I wish science was embedded in every single school and that they all had the skills or the qualified teachers and the assets to actually do it. But everyone's got a footy.
Yeah, you did have that for sport, you know, and you can see the pathway. Yeah,
absolutely.
So from there, you kind of where do you find, you know, the infrastructure? Because I mean, you say that sport is a visible pathway, but you're still coming from a pretty small town. I mean, short of rugby league and netball, I don't imagine many javelin throwers came out of Carcoar.
Look, I was still crawling around on the field trying to tackle my brothers when I saw wheelchair racing, and to me, it was as foreign as anything I'd ever seen. I never really knew that they were like me, you know. Yep. Like I literally grew up crawling around the paddocks with hands in the dirt. I mean, it's funny when you said that you could eat that dirt. I ate plenty of that dirt. But then when I saw it, I saw wheelchair racing. My teacher introduced me to it. She brought wheelchairs out to the school, put my mates in wheelchairs, put my peers in wheelchairs. My town found out that I wanted to have a look at this sport. And 200 cockies, 200 farmers, concreters, fencers, 200 people who didn't have the money in their pocket, but they found it. And they would raise 10 grand in 2 weeks, and they would open up the world to me. They would buy me a racing wheelchair. They would buy me a ticket to go over to the US to compete and to see other kids in wheelchairs race. And they told my mum, when my mum and dad tried to stop them, and they said that, well, we weren't financial, but we were a very proud family.
Yeah.
My mum and dad tried to stop the town from raising the bucks. They said to stay out of it. It's between us and the boy. And they would raise that cash. They would tell my mum to drive me down to Sydney to put me on this plane. And then all of a sudden I'm 13, 14 years old heading over to the US. And it just opened up a pathway that gave me the world. It changed my life, changed the way that I see myself, changed the way that I see where disability, what it is and where it sits in community. It was a pretty beautiful moment to start, mate. It's probably why I just felt so grateful to do this for 25 years, because when you start from such a place and you require the intervention of people again and again to give you the opportunity, you know, like there's a lot of gratitude there behind that.
Yeah, I mean, a beautiful story, mate. Sound like good people out there. And again, with that, you've been overseas, you've seen that as a kid. Good time to see that too, you know, as a teenager when you are starting to weigh up, you know, what's happening after school, and you know, your local community's backing you. And then, of course, you know, you have the convenience of the next Olympics is just is in your state. And then,
well, I think that actually was one of the triggers to get me in there as well. Yeah. You know, even seeps into the tiniest little towns in this country. The idea that we're going to host an Olympics and a Paralympic Games, that's what filters through.
Yeah.
And that does have cut through.
Yeah.
And it was at that period of time where I was realising that I was different to everyone else in the world. Mm. Well, in my world at that point in time. Yeah. Like, I'm looking around and seeing all my mates get bigger and stronger and quicker, and the only time I'm seeing other wheelchairs is when I'm in a hospital and I'm looking at all these people who are sick, and I'm like, I'm not sick.
Or Anzac Day.
Or Anzac Day. I'm not returned serviceman, but it just kind of changed everything, you know, like everything.
Yeah. So then where did you find yourself? Silvers, got a bit of silverware. Then what's the play from there? Is this a job? Is this or is this time to study? You've got another 4 years until the next games, and you've had your big moment at home.
After that, 90% of Olympic and Paralympic athletes don't do it for cash.
Yeah.
You know, like they're not banking millions of bucks. They're not banking hundreds of thousands of bucks. They're barely banking tens of thousands of bucks.
Yeah. Like the Olympics was created.
It is funny though, the perception that there is this idea that they're seeking individual wealth, but it's by far that they're seeking to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, and to put their stamp on the Australian tapestry, you know, like the wide kind of story that the green and gold tells. For me, my coach said that I had to go to uni. He didn't want he said he didn't want my friends to be other wheelchair racers.
Yep.
He said that I want your friends to be something, a completely different world, because when this done, you need to be defined as more than that.
Yeah.
So I went back to Bathurst, Charles Sturt University, and studied to become a teacher, and did a few good years out there, and then came back, took another year off, and went back into Athens pretty fired up, and been in a good paddock at Bathurst, and came back and won my couple of gold medals. Won my couple of gold medals, and then it kind of did turn into a job a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it was, you know, from 2004 through till 2018, it was both a job, and I like to describe it the way Dan Kowalski describes it as well. It's the Olympic and Paralympic athlete is the athlete that is given this teddy bear when they're 1 year old.
Yeah.
And this teddy bear means more than anything in the world to them, and they carry it until that teddy bear is this desire to see whether or not you can be the absolute best in the world, and that just becomes who you are. And you know, you just sink your kind of life into that area from that point for the next decade.
When did you start feeling that responsibility that I'm sure a lot of people carried for you when you first went over to the States? The whole town flew you over there, and then you start seeing, you know, other athletes in wheelchairs. When did it start hitting home to you that now you were the guy on the screen or in the stadium, you know, that kids in wheelchairs were looking at?
I don't know whether it did. For racing, I was always intrinsically motivated, you know, like I would get up there and, I could get a gold medal, or I could win a race and you'd get praise. But if I did something wrong within it, I would always kind of, personally, you'd be questioned with it, or vice versa. You would do a race and you'd get negative feedback, and it wouldn't matter because I would know where it was headed. Yeah. The reason that I did recognise that I was part of community when there were kids coming through, because when I was the kid, you know, Louise Savage, she was the greatest wheelchair racer of her time, of probably all time. She would take me into her living room and allow me to sleep on a couch as a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. The world champion when I was 17, 18, 19 years old out of Canada would allow me to live with him for 2 months every year. Right. The community look after each other. Mm-hmm. So when I got to my point where it was my turn, or it was that moment that I was able to be at the rare air, the pointy end of the field, I just made sure that I knew that the next guys coming around, they were part of my family, and they were allowed, you know, you just invite them in. Yep.
How are you feeling now? You know, obviously, firmly, you know, you're on our TV screens now, and you'll be very much there'll be as much profile around you now. You got your own SBS show. You're anchoring the Paralympics coverage. You know, Kurt Fearnley is implanted into the Australian kind of public life now, public eye. How do you feel like you've still got, you know, all of the household name, but you don't have the output of 40 marathons? How is that? You can kind of deal with it. This all comes with it, right? This all comes with it when you're training and you're competing. But now you're actually a celebrity. It's not necessarily related to the the extreme cardio of a marathon.
Mate, I do look forward to life being thrown up in the air and going full Kardashian over the next. Look, I'm gonna go full Hollywood on the Paralympic Games. It's been a real like I've got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and when my 7-year-old gets asked what Dad does, he tells people I talk on television.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so much of my life was about that high rev kind of building and fatiguing moments. Life is much more about trying to tell the story of people around me. People told my story in such a positive way for such a long period of time. Now I get to tell their story.
Yeah.
You know, so being in what does Australia really think on SBS that's coming out on August 18,
Yep.
being able to tell the story of what is the real experience of people with disabilities, have an honest conversation, invite people inside the curtain to see what it is to actually live with the disability in this country, or to line up and be on 7 the following week and to introduce a huge part of this country to my family.
Yeah.
And that's who I feel like the Paralympic team is.
Yep.
They're my family, and I love them. And I can't wait to see what it is that they get to contribute to the Paralympic world. And I will do everything in my power to tell it in a way that accurately and allows people to feel what it is that they're going through.
Mate, you're not a Kardashian until no one can remember why you're famous. So you've got enough medals to last. You know, I think you got 10, 20 years until we forget where did he come from again? Yeah. Yeah. Now you are doing this show with the SBS, working alongside some fellow darlings of Australian public life, Noni Hazelhurst of Play School fame, and of course Casey Donovan, the Tamworth Terror. How has that been? What does Australia really think about? ...
So I would take the community for people with disabilities, and we would run a few different experiments. There would be the largest survey done around what people really think around disability. It's pretty confronting. Mm-hmm. I will say that. Even I had a fairly solid idea of what it is that the story was going to be told, but then when you hear it, when you see it take place, it was pretty challenging to watch.
Yep.
But I think that whether or not we tell that story or not, people are experiencing it. Mm-hmm. There are kids in the playground that are experiencing this atmosphere that we don't really acknowledge. Mm-hmm. This show acknowledges it.
Yeah, right.
Anyone that watches this will understand and get an insight into what it is to be a person with a disability.
So we're not talking strictly discrimination. We're talking hurdles as well, and just the challenges or the atmosphere.
We're talking social everything from social interaction to stigma to belief systems to literal, social barriers that are standing up in the way of somebody being able to live their life.
Yep.
It was really I love my community, and most of the time I want to go out of my way to build it up, to do nothing but really positive stuff about who we are or who we can be and the potential of the community. This one, in the end, I think it is positive. Mm-hmm. It's just very, very honest.
Yep. Was there much stuff that you hadn't yourself experienced? Now that you're looking at all these different other perspectives, I mean, you would have felt a fair whack of this. You know, as you said, you were lucky enough to have a community that rallied together and got the ball rolling for you, and got the ball rolling to help you live your life. But you still, at the end of the day, were in a tiny country town, and you, like you said, you were crawling around tackling your brothers on the football oval.
Mate, I lived a really weird life. In one part of my world, I was praised for being this Paralympic athlete, this invincible person, and then I would go 10 metres the other way and be an object of pity.
Yeah.
So it's a really strange way to spend your time, and more often my life was also defined and I was well known through sport. So a lot of the stuff that we would experience, I hadn't felt for decades.
Yeah.
But when you see it again, you feel it again.
Yeah.
And we've got young kids kind of interacting with the world and, just having their back turned on them because they slur their speech.
Yep.
You've got young women who have small stature being mocked to their face And it just, there's an honesty to this that even, I don't know whether it's shocked or hurt, but at the end of the day, even though with that said, I still think it is a positive story. I still think it is a positive show because it shows the strength of each of these people, however they deal with their life, and the optimism of who they are and who they can be and where they're headed. So it's I'm equal parts excited and nervous for this thing to come to air.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's going to be a hell of a watch, mate. It's interesting, actually, you hear a lot, from people within the disability community about one thing they hate is the fussing. You know what I mean? Like it's one thing to pity, it's one thing to be ignored, but then to be, fussed over is equally frustrating as well. You know what I mean?
Most people with disabilities just want to be your mate. Just want to be out in community and seen equal with their non-disabled peers. Be given an equal run at it, the same that we give I hope we would give to every other person out in the world. They don't want fuss, they don't want pity, they don't want praise. They just want to be seen as equal, nothing more.
They want to be seen by everyone else in the same way that everyone gets seen by a train conductor.
Yes. Yes.
If he has to get the ramp out, he'll get the ramp out. Otherwise, he's not fucking looking at
you. Not me, though. I want to be seen as a deity. If I want to be seen as some sort of godlike figure. So,
the Kardashian martyr. Kurt Fearnley.
Yeah, exactly. Although you know what, when you do get given the job of hosting a Paralympic opening ceremony, you know what you realise very quickly? They cop a lot of shit.
Yeah. You're a sitting duck.
I'm a sitting duck out there during that games, and I know that everyone's going to go, don't read social media. I know I'm going to read it, and it's going to hurt. But I mean. Yeah. No Batuta stories on that one.
We've got you in the crosshairs, Kurt. Yeah, no, I think after speaking to some of the people you've spoken to on this new TV show, you might have some thick skin coming into this media run. I guess anchor. You're a TV host, and. What else do you find yourself working in nowadays? I mean, I'm guessing like anyone who's come back from overseas with a bit of silverware, you're on the corporate speaking circuit.
Oh, mate, life is. I got not a. People actually they ask me what I do, and I don't really know.
Your kid has a better idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like every other man and his dog, I've got too many podcasts, of course. I do a bit of talking around culture and community. I do work with people with disabilities around employment. I've got a little school that's looked after by the Edmund Rice Foundation out of Nairobi. We've got 75 kids with disabilities getting 5 days a week education. I don't know, man. I just life. I've got a farm. I've got a couple of 100 acres up here in God's country in Dungog. Mate, I'm living the dream.
The beautiful pipeline of Dungog. That's some good country up there. Actually, you could almost eat that as well, mate.
Again, I've got a healthy diet of dirt and grit, and anything that produces Dougie Walters, mate, is fine by me.
What are you running up there?
Cattle,
right. There's some Dungog. There was something that happened in Dungog. I mean, of course, you got Dougie Walters, but there was a famous film shot out there. It'll come to me in a second. So you are on the Australia Day Council of New South Wales. I've got the list of boards here, mate. NDIS, Independent Advisory Council. That's a big one. That's a tough one.
They're from a few years back. I was part of the Independent Advisory Council during the rollout from 2013 through to 2016, I think. It was a big one, man. Like it was. The NDIS isn't perfect, but when you went around Australia and saw the reality of lived experience with disability before the NDIS, it's hard not to be just grateful that we are where we are, even though it might need a good kicking and bumping and resizing for the next 50 years. But I'm glad we got it. Yeah,
well, I'm sure people were saying the same thing about Medicare when we finally got it as well.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And of course, you are now an outgoing Australian Paralympic Committee, I guess, member. Are you still involved there in any capacity?
Yeah, Paralympics. I'm on the athlete council of the International Paralympic Committee. I was on the board of the Australian Paralympic Committee. And mate, the community gave me the world, gave me everything. So if there's ways that I can kind of give back and play a part in it still, then I'm all for it.
Well, there you have it. Kurt Fearnley, champ. I'm trying to rattle off all these medals here, but he's done it all on the track, and now he's doing it all on the screen for us. Thank you for joining us today, Kurt. What a great yarn. Good to see a Blaney kid or a Central West kid, Carcoar kid done well. And all the best with your cattle, mate.
Thanks, mate. Take care.